Hello everybody, welcome to 3.11. We're going to talk about assessing attainment, background, and biodata. This is a super short one, so it'll just take a couple minutes. Say hello to Quincy again, he's still around. Quincy! There you go. So, assessing attainments, background, biodata. What do we know? Considerations for the use of attainments, background, and biodata. Okay, you got to think in terms of legality. Am I allowed to have this information? Does the applicant necessarily have to sign a release for this information in results? So maybe it's a FERPA, maybe it's a HIPAA kind of thing, right? So, the defensibility. Am I legitimately allowed to use this? The validity. Does it mean anything to the hiring process? Or does it just, I read somewhere that someone was doing this and it sounded good to me, so I'm down with it? Or can I say, look, we have measured this through incoming people for the last 5 years and we found that this is a great predictor of on-the-job performance within this domain. Those are the kind of conversations, that's what a validity argument sounds like. And again, back to adverse impact, you know why we learned to calculate that, because we have to protect the company and we have to protect our applicants. So we want to understand, does it represent privacy violation? And then candidate perceptions. How does a candidate feel about being asked about this, right? Does it really matter if I'm an extrovert, an introvert? Why are you asking me this? So, background checks and references, these are easily defensible. There's no real issue with asking for many of these things. Security requirements, clearances, often really, this is at the forefront. If you're going to be hiring armored car guards, it's probably best that they don't have an armed robbery conviction, which leads us to like a criminal record. Right? So, credit check is often used more and more, and it's interesting. The insurance industry had wanted to use credit checks to price policy premiums. Apartment rentals, right? If they're trying to determine if you're going to be a decent applicant, right? Credit check is often used. Police departments like to run credit checks because what happens if someone has a history of credit malfeasance? Are they more likely then to accept bribes or engage in illegal activity as a result of that? Right? We might use private investigators to do this information, and reference checks as well. So all of those are potential, and these are pretty easily justified. Not that they've necessarily been validated, but they are certainly easily justified. Now, attainments, degrees earned, school transcripts, certifications, licenses, test scores. So notice that if those of you applying to graduate school, if you have to take the GRE, if you have to take the MCAT, or you have to take the LSAT, right? These are test scores they're trying to attain to determine whether you should be hired or allowed into a program or not. Many of these are easily defensible, and tradition may be as important as validity. And think about the use of the GRE or the use of the SAT to bring someone into college. Are they valid? Best validity probably comes from GPA in these regards, not SATs, right? But this is something that's been done forever and will continue to be done for a good long time. Now, some are required by law, right? Certifications. If you're going to become a nurse, then you need. One concern here might be for forgery, that documentation can be forged, sometimes is, and you also maybe want to think in terms of data from international sources. Might be more suspect than sources within one's own country. But it's a judgment call there. Biodata, physical attributes, size, weight, gender, appearance. Now, we are getting into, and you can see down lower it says defensibility can be an issue. Some of this stuff just doesn't matter. It can't be demonstrated to matter. My height is going to be what was started as 5'8", as I'm shrinking. I'm shrinking. So I'm maybe like down to 5'7", but really this has no bearing on basically any of the occupations I choose to do. Not useful. Appearance can be a tough one. Many times in customer service. I think when we talk about physical attributes, one of my favorite examples is think in terms of Victoria's Secret, and organizations like that have often had problems because they seem to hire on the basis of attractiveness or appearance quite often, or weight, right, figure. Is that defensible? And some argue it would be, some argue it wouldn't be, and those cases still get argued. Or Hooters, as an organization, the Playboy clubs, etc. Is this defensible or not? Strangely, when you think about this, my mom, and obviously this is an exception, when my mom was a casting director, I mean, she's looking for a type. She's looking for someone at a given height, a given weight. I'll tell you a story. She cast Gunsmoke for years. Half of its length, I think the show went 24 years, and I think she cast it for the last 12. And Gunsmoke centers around Marshall Dillon, Matt Dillon, right, who's the Marshal of Dodge City. James Arness, who played Matt Dillon, was about 6'6". He's a big guy, right, strapping guy. And he often talked to my mom and said, look, Pam, you got to cast a bad guy, a heavy, as they called him. Don't be, read the script. And if it's someone I have to fight with, you got to cast a big guy. I don't want to be Marshall Dillon, a 6'6", on TV beating the shit out of some guy who's like 5'9". It don't look right. So notice that height was a requirement. Now, within the movie industry, that's probably justifiable. Other industries, most other industries, not so much, right? Physical capacity, strength, endurance, coordination, eyesight, hearing, smell. Think about it. Some people work in organizations as super tasters. You better have a good sense of smell, right? If you're going to work in a winery, if you're an enologist, that is a winemaker, you better have a good sense of smell. That might be a legitimate criteria. A lot of warehouse jobs say must be able to lift 75 pounds repeatedly. And we talked about like dexterity might be a quality if you're hiring a watchmaker, right? Those are probably defensible, but notice other areas it might not be defensible. And then physical health, conditions, illness, previous illness. I don't even want to open up that can of worms. I don't know what to say about pre-existing conditions or anything like that. Notice ADA protections then kind of have to be integrated with these conceptions of, is this a bona fide occupational qualification? Can the task be modified to allow differently abled people to participate? And then privacy is always an issue as well. So this is when you deal with your legal team. This is, you look at what the current state of the law says regarding these. How to choose? Carefully. So, no, validate the need or utility. And we can go back to that job requirements matrix, right? We can start working backwards and say, is this a priority at all? Is this something that is needed? Is there another workaround? We have to make sure that we're protecting people's privacy as we use this. And again, adverse impact is something to consider. So we'll need to negotiate a myriad of state, federal regulation laws, and that's one aspect of it. But then again, so are probably equally important, if not more important, is the applicant reactions are again to be considered. And then how do you use these? Well, consider that most attainments are used as hurdles that are required to be in place to be hired, right? Rather than components of the candidate ranking process. So nursing certification, PhD, like I've said, right, to teach psychology at OSU, CDL to drive a truck. If someone, so you put these up in front of the assessment process, right? And if people don't have these attainments, then boom, they're just not qualified to move on through the process. Move them up to the front so you don't get surprised towards the end. You don't want to spend a whole bunch of people, time and money on people who are not, don't have the necessary attainments. So, and think about that when you're designing your own process. What does it imply for the order scoring, verifying during the assessment process? Like I said, get this shit up front so that you're not wasting your time or anybody else's time and money. And that's about it for this one. Like I said, I promised you a short one. We got a couple kind of bullet type presentations that are in this section, and then we got some longer ones to make up for it, because I know you'd be disappointed if they were all short. Or not. But anyway, there we go. Hi, Terrence.